Hi there my friends, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be working in acrylics. I'm working on a Winsor & Newton artist canvas board. It measures 14 inches by 10 inches. It does come pre-gessoed, but I've added a couple more layers of gesso, sanded them down, and then I've airbrushed carbon black and a warm umber, both by Liquitex, just to create a more smoother surface. I've then used a Tracedown, a white Tracedown, to trace down my guidelines from my initial sketch. This is done relatively easy, and once you've got this sort of carbon copy on your canvas, I can begin to paint. So I've popped the finish paint into the top right hand corner so you can see where I'm heading. Now what I do, this is how I work with acrylics, is I like to get a monochrome base coat down first, and what that means is I just work with Liquitex unbleached titanium white. It's sort of a creamy colour paint, and I just lay down where I want details, where I want the lightest lights, and then I'll leave gaps, or I'll water down the acrylic paint in areas where I want the darker elements. But all of this is just applying simple guidelines to the canvas for me to then glaze acrylic colours over the top. And this complete painting was worked with Liquitex Basics and a few De La Rowney paints too, but mostly Liquitex Basics. I like them because they're quite transparent, quite translucent, so you can build up lots and lots of glazes. And it's hard to photograph really because you get a little bit of a glare, but I did manage to get a photograph of the finished painting. That will be left now for a couple of weeks, and then I will varnish it. I know a lot of artists like to use a high gloss varnish on their paintings, but I prefer to varnish with a matte varnish finish. Hope everybody's keeping well. This is sped up, so else it would be just so boring to watch, because literally going in and just applying a lot of detail here just with a couple of acrylic brushes. Now I do have a question from a lady, and she says, how do I wash my brushes after using acrylic? And I just, to be honest, just rinse them out in water. If I'm using a really big brush to lay down a lot of acrylic paint, yes, the paint can move up towards the furrow of the brush, and in which case I just use soapy water and rinse that out after use, straight away after use. But how I paint normally is I do keep the paint towards the edge of the brush, so it doesn't collect back up in the furrow end of the brush, and that's when you can cause brushes to splay and things like that. Obviously if paint brushes do splay over time, then I never get rid of them, I never discard them, they can always be used for something. And there is a Masterson's or Masters brush cleaner that I do use. It's a soap in a little box, and I've been able to revive most brushes, but it's very rare that any of my brushes reach that stage. So here we go. So we're just building up the layers now. What I have done is I've taken my photograph that I'm working from, one of my own photographs, and I've edited it, and I've made it black and white, and it's much easier then to work a monochrome base layer working from a black and white photo. It's more tricky to do this from a photo that's already still in colour. So moving onwards, as you can see, I'm working up a little bit at a time, and I do tend to just flip from one area to another, else it can get pretty laborious. I know not everybody paints like this with acrylics, but it's just how I enjoy painting with acrylics, and I'm self-taught, completely self-taught in all of my different mediums, and this is just the route that I've found that works best for me. So just building up the texture there. There still is some texture on the canvas board. I haven't taken the texture away completely by building up a couple of layers of gesso and then airbrushing. If that's something that you'd like me to make a video of, how I start from an initial canvas board, build up the layers of gesso and do the airbrushing for backgrounds, just drop a comment down below and I'll make a video about that when I start my next acrylic painting. I'm going to be working for Derwent for the next couple of weeks on a project, so I'll try and fit something in between Derwent sessions, I guess you could say. Wow. So yes, just building up the layers, so going a little bit more opaque where I know the finished painting needs to be lighter, and less opaque where I know the finished painting is going to be slightly darker. And in some areas I could have gone a lot harsher with this white. I'm saying white, but it's unbleached titanium white, so it is a creamy colour. It's looking white because it's going onto this dark board, and obviously it is a little bit transparent. It's not as opaque as running a piece of chalk across a board would be. So some of the background colour is coming through the paint layers, but that's fine. It works well for what I need it to do. But yeah, I could have worked some stronger lights, and you'll see that during the painting process I will glaze colours, then I'll go back on top of the dried glazed colours and do this again. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places. And the more you go backwards and forwards between layering and glazing, the more depth your finished painting will have. And when the painting is finished, it's really, as I was saying, it's hard to get a photograph that gives you that depth within all of the colour glazes. As the light goes through the different glazes, it bounces around, and yeah, it gives a lot of depth and a lot of warmth in this piece. So I'm working on a table, on one of my tables in my studio, doing this piece. So this is lent on a little stand, I guess you could say, at about 15 or 20 degrees. But working on something bigger, I'll then work upright at the easel. So this is the first of the glazes going on, and this is the Liquitex Basics. They're lovely for glazing because they're so transparent, and you'll see me drying layers with hairdryer just to speed things up. Acrylic dries really quick anyway. The acrylics I use dry really quick anyway, but if I need to speed them up even more, then I'll just use the hairdryer, and you can go straight on. That's the beauty of acrylics compared to oils. If I work with oils, I work with a mixing medium called Liquin, and that allows the layers to dry overnight, so they'll be touch dry the following day. So obviously you can't speed up the drying with a hairdryer with oils because they're flammable. So but I could have done this in oils, but I just like the speed of working with acrylics. Although saying speed, this was still quite a long process. I don't work all day on one piece. I'll just work for a couple of hours and then take a break and come back and work another couple of hours, take a break, come back, and then build it up slowly like that. So it's very, watching this, it's very self-explanatory. I'm mixing, I've got a palette to the side. If you want to see the palette that I use, there is a video. I'll try and remember to link it below. There is a video on my website, on my YouTube channel, that does show which palette I use. It's a grey glass palette in a Masterson's palette holder, and I can put the paints in there, put the acrylic paints into that, put them onto the glass palette, put a piece of wet kitchen roll or tissue paper in the palette, pop the lid on, and those paints will stay wet for weeks. I also have a fine mist sprayer to the side of me as well, and while I'm working I'll occasionally just mist the paints just to keep them wet while I'm working and while the lid isn't on the palette. So going around the edges of the eye, just building up the shadows. And now I do have the reference photo I'm working from to my left hand side. I'm just using it on my phone. I've just got the photograph on my phone and it's back in colour. So I've deleted the edit that made it black and white, and now I'm working from a colour photograph once again. And that photograph is just guidance. I'm not going for hyperrealism here. I want to give the portrait my own spin, so to speak, the colours that I want to use, but it gives me a rough idea as I'm working. So adding some touches of yellow ochre and a greyish green in some areas, and highlights and lowlights and midtones. The great thing is about doing the underpainting and monochrome underpainting is you now have a lot of a structure to work on. It makes life so much easier that you haven't got to think of, well, you still have but not as much, but lights and darks as well as colour mixing. It seems to narrow it down slightly, so you're more interested now in colour values rather than contrast. And all contrast is how dark something is and how light something is, and the contrast between the two. Because obviously, as you can see in the finished painting, I did want the light source to be coming in from the top left. So I did know in my mind's eye, I guess you could say, where I wanted the light coming from, hence where I wanted shadowed areas to be. Sorry about the hair popping into frame there. So the video is running at about 30 minutes, 33 minutes, so not a long one. But as I said, if you want me to create a video that takes you through canvas preparation and airbrushing, I have had a couple of people already ask about airbrushing, so I might as well throw everything together and put it in one video for you. So if you're interested in that, just leave a comment below. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps the channel and the elusive algorithms. And if you have already subscribed, thank you so much. It really is appreciated. So I'm just hovering over the canvas there so I can just make sure I'm not altering the size of that pupil too much. Towards the end of the painting, and that wasn't filmed, I actually popped the canvas up on the easel and I had altered the pupil on the lion's left pupil, the eye that I'm working on now. I had slightly altered the size of the pupil, so I did go back in and correct that. And that's the best thing about acrylics as well, is once they're dry, as long as they haven't been varnished, you can keep going back to it. So if you need a break, say you've been working on, there you go, there's my please like and subscribe sticker. If you're sort of unsure about a painting, whether it's finished or not, what I do is I pop it on my easel and then walk away and come back to it maybe the next day, maybe a couple of days or even longer, and have another look at it. And 9 times out of 10, if it's something you've been sitting on and looking at and painting on for a long time, you sort of get a bit blind to what's actually happening and what you can see and what you can't see. And if you leave it and walk away and then come back, even if it's just for a coffee break, you can sometimes see things that you hadn't seen before, especially viewing from a distance. What I do during paintings, during drawings, I'm constantly taking photographs on my phone and looking at the image on a smaller screen. Things that are obvious definitely jump out to you. Obviously, you don't want to get to this point and then realise you've made a mistake in the initial drawing. That's something that needs to be sorted out right at the beginning. If there's any mistakes in a drawing, composition wise, or even the basic structure of something, that needs to be sorted out before you start painting. Don't think you're going to be able to amend something later on in a painting that is a structural problem. That would be far more difficult, i.e. if one of the eyes was too low down. I mean, you could go in and alter that, but it's a huge step once you've started painting, especially once you've started applying colour. So building up just a little bit of texture there, and this is a backwards and forwards process that could go on forever, but at some point you've got to call a painting done. So building up with the unbleached titanium white again, and that will be glazed over again. The glazes that I'm using, I don't use any glazing mediums, I just use water. The paints, Liquitex basic paints, are translucent enough that just a little bit of water added to them is enough to make them flow to be able to glaze with. There you can see them in the palette to the right. I'm going to have to attempt, I think, to get a splurge and get another camera that will go over the palette, because I have had a few people asking for that. I never use a colour straight out of the tube except the unbleached titanium white. Everything else is a mixture. I don't like to see paintings, I'm saying 96-97% of the time, where the paint's been used directly from the tube. The colours can look so false. If you're unsure of colour mixing and you don't know where to begin, it's just trial and error, and it's practice. It's knowing what colours work together and what colours don't work together, and it's knowing your blacks as well. Ivory black, Mars black, all different blacks. Some have a cool tone to them, some have a warm tone to them, and it's really getting used to your colours. I very rarely use black. I like to mix my own black, but if I do go to use a black, then I make sure it's the black that I need, whether it's a warm tone or cool tone. If you'd like any colour mixing videos, then just pop a comment in below and I can do that as well, adding on to my to-do list. So just glazing out now towards the bottom part of the painting. And if any of the glazes go on too thickly and I end up covering up the detail underneath, it won't completely cover up the detail because it is a glaze. It will soften the look, it will soften the contrast of the detail underneath. And once it's dry, which, as I said, a couple of minutes with a hairdryer, can then go back on with the unbleached titanium white and add in more detail if I need to. Excuse me. And that is something that I do constantly during the creation of an acrylic painting. Backwards and forwards, detail, glazing on top, adding more detail, and glazing on top, etc. And every time you glaze, you don't have to be glazing the same colour. You can glaze a lot of different colours into a very small area to give it depth and add to the realism, because animals aren't one solid colour, although it does look like it here as I'm turning the board round. I'm propping it back up. So that glaze going over there, I knew I would be going in and adding different colour glazing to that area later on. So you can build glaze on top of another glaze. You don't have to add a glaze, then detail, and then glaze. You can add glaze, dry it, and then add another glaze on top to darken certain areas. Obviously, if you want to lighten an area, you're then going to have to go in with a more opaque colour, and that's when I reach for the unbleached titanium white. And then glaze on top of that once it's dry. If you've got any questions, if I'm not covering everything and I'm missing a certain answer that you're looking for, just drop your question in the comments below and I'll get back to you and try to help. At one point, it was quite cold in the studio the day I was working on this area, and I dragged the sleeve of my jacket through the paint. So I've now got a jacket with acrylic paint up the sleeve, but that's fine. Never dress for the best. Yeah, never dress to impress if you're working in a studio, because no doubt you'll just end up covered in paint. I'm normally quite a clean worker, but yeah, I was listening to a podcast, I think, and forgot where my sleeve was, but hey ho. I use cheap brushes. Let's get onto the subject of brushes. These blue ones. They're by, they're called Crafters Companions, and they're the cheapest of cheap brushes. They're just showing you there that the first glaze is on. So I just swiveled the camera around so you could actually see everything glazed apart from the nose. So everything's got first coat of glaze on. So it looks flat. Yeah, there's no two ways about it. When it's just got one coat of a glaze on, it looks pretty flat. So now I start going in now and building up the second layer of detail that will be glazed on top of as well. So yeah, the brushes. Royal and Langnickel, I think they're by. The ones that are blue, where you can see like the textured area to grip to, they're really cheap. You can get a pack of those for £6, £5, £6. The bristles are Golden Tacklon, which is a nylon bristle, and I've had them years and they're brilliant. Yeah, and the little blue one to the side in between the two Crafters Companions, I don't know what that is. That's just a cheap, probably from somewhere like the Range or Wilkinson's or somewhere like that. And the one I'm holding is Art Studio, and you can get a massive pack of those brushes, I think from the Range, for about £6 or £7 as well. So when it comes to acrylic painting and oil painting, I don't spend much on brushes, and they last years, literally years. When it comes to painting in watercolour, I'm a little bit more fussy about my brushes, but I still don't pay astronomical prices. Once you get to know your tools, the more you play with your materials, whether that's paints or pencils or brushes, anything, the more, and paper, the more you play with your materials, the more you'll find out what can be achieved by using them, what techniques they like, what techniques they don't like, and then you just bend your materials to suit your needs. I was dabbing the acrylic paint then with my finger just to soften the look, even though it's going to be glazed over. So not going in with the pure unbleached titanium white now for detailing, but with something a little bit of a softer look. Anything that you put on, you can glaze over. So if you put something on and you're not quick enough to remove it before it dries, you can glaze over it and disguise it. It's not a problem. If you're really quick, if I put some paint on and I don't want it there, I quickly dip my brush in clean water, dab it onto where I've just added the paint, applied the paint, and get a tissue and dab it back off. And because the layer underneath is dry, and believe me, when acrylic paint is dry, it's not going anywhere, the layer that you've just applied can be just washed off. I know a lot of people don't like using acrylics because they dry so quick, but for me that's that's one of the draws of working with acrylics, is they dry so quick. Okay, so here I'm going on with the unbleached titanium white and beginning to add some detail here. I don't want to cover it all with this detail, but I do want these to be glazed as highlights where the sun would just be hitting them. Because I've done all that work underneath and I don't want to cover all of that up, but I do want some hairs to be standing, not proud, but more visible. And when the painting is finished, there's no physical texture at all, it's all visual texture. Some people like to paint with palette knives and use their acrylics nice and thick, but that's not how I work. Oh, the hair getting in the way again. And the chin, the hairs on the chin has just been worked exactly the same. So just building up layer after layer. I didn't count how many layers I did. It was just a lot, but it's thoroughly enjoyable. If there's any subjects that you'd like me to paint or draw, or any mediums that you'd like me to work with, just let me know in the comments below. As I said, I work in all different mediums, so graphite, ink, oil, acrylic, coloured pencil, pastel, so oil pastel, so many things. So, and it's nice. The reason I enjoy working with different mediums is it stops me getting bored, and I can honestly say I hardly ever get art block, and I think it's because I work with different mediums and I switch between them. So I'll work a few paintings in one medium and then I'll switch to another medium, or I'll have different mediums on different paintings going at the same time, so I can switch between them. Just depends what I have in the studio at the time, but it's really nice. Now where my arm's resting at the minute, as soon as I move my arm, you'll see a little blob of paint on the canvas, and that's come off my sleeve. It's dried there, so it's not being moved around, and I just work over that and glaze over it, and it just becomes part of the painting, which is fine. I didn't realise I'd done it until it was dry. Dabbing in with the my finger again just to soften it. And what ends up as being too harsh is just glazed over a few more times to soften the look of it in any one place. The nose was worked just the same. Obviously the nose in this clip just here isn't finished. I had put an initial layer on, and I just come back to that later and add a few more glazes with different colours just to make it look more realistic. I didn't film putting the whiskers in because literally my head was over the canvas. You've got to have a steady hand and you only get one go at it, and obviously with it being acrylic and it dries very quick, once that whisker's in, it's there to stay. So when I do another larger acrylic painting, if there's whiskers or anything, I'll be standing up at the easel and I'll be able to film that more easily. But my camera is overhead pointing down, and I just needed my head in front of the canvas to get the whiskers on. But you load up your brush with a lot of pigment and quite a bit of water, but not too much when you're doing whiskers, and you just want to do one whisker in one stroke. I must admit, these round brushes, the one I'm using now, does hold quite a lot of pigment. So I'm able to get quite a lot of work without going backwards and forwards to the paint, which is nice. But as I said, you know, it's using your materials and finding out what they can do for you. And as you can see, I'm just using, well, 4 brushes, but most of the work could have been done with 2. So you don't need a lot of materials. If you're unsure about acrylics, just buy black and white, a tube of black, a tube of white, and just have a play, and you get some really nice effects. And then maybe if you're happy with the black and white work you're doing, then maybe buy a couple of colours, and you can try glazing and things like that. And then if it's something you think you're going to enjoy, then you can start buying more colours and adding to your supplies. And if it's just something for practice, then you don't need to work on canvas even. You can work on paper, you can work on cardboard, you can work on anything, you know, to have a play. I do sometimes work acrylics on paper, and if I'm going to do that, then I will put a layer of gesso on the paper first. And obviously working gesso on paper, I thin the gesso down with a little bit of water, and then it won't need sanding down, it will be smooth. So this looks really harsh at the minute, and it's just looking harsh because there isn't a glaze on it yet. It all softens down and goes back into the painting once the glazes are being added. And you can either add a large glaze, which will glaze everything, these little strokes and everything underneath it, or you can add very fine glazes with the tip of the brush just to certain areas, and in one hair you could have multiple glazes doing it that way. Excuse me. I'm probably mixing paint right now, so I hadn't picked up on that during the editing, so sorry about that, but I am back in. Okay, so adding some more highlights, and you can see the nose there as all his different glazes on now. And there's a lot more glazing to go on the mane as well. So it's had an initial glaze, all that work that you've just seen me do on the mane underneath his chin and around his neck area, that's had an initial glaze, but I do come back and there's many more glazes that go into that before you get to the finished painting, the top right hand corner. But I just wanted to show you real time how slow this actually is, just in case you think you can get a painting done in a night. I mean, some people probably can, but that's not me at all. So this is real time, and some of this will be glazed over as well. Just watching the directions and the lengths. That's one thing to remember when working on any animal portrait, is hair length or feather length, direction and width. And where the hairs are very short, sometimes you're just seeing the very tip of them. Depending on the direction, you're actually looking at the animal. And a quick glance at my messy work surface and the finished painting. Thank you so much if you've made it this far. If you have any questions, please pop it in the comments below. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, I hope you have fun with your acrylics and look forward to hearing all about what you're working on at the moment. So that's it for me for now. Take care, and I'll see you all soon. Bye bye. Today we're going to be looking at the creation of a puffin in acrylics. I'm working on a Winsor & Newton canvas board, 12 inches by 10 inches. I've coated it completely with a nice even coat of acrylic paint, blending down from a darker blue to a lighter blue at the bottom, and I'm just spattering on some white acrylic paint to create a little bit of a sea mist at the back of the bird. I've sketched the bird outline in using a white pastel pencil, and now I'm beginning to add just some base coats. The paints I'm going to be using today are predominantly Liquitex Basics. They're a transparent, quite a transparent pigmented acrylic paint, ideal for how I work because I work in a multiple amount of glazes. Excuse me. So I'm just applying a little bit of a base coat onto the beak now, going on with a yellow. Now obviously yellow, a transparent yellow over blue is going to give it a slightly greenish haze, but that's fine. Anything that looks natural, there's a lot of colours in the bill of a puffin, so I don't mind that at all. Now once I'd got that first layer on, I dried it with a hairdryer. Now I'm going over with a second coat, a cream coat, still a little bit transparent, translucent, so I can see the bands of colour that I've put on underneath, so I won't need to sketch anything in again. And this is how I like to work with acrylics, building up nice gentle layers, blocking in areas, putting in detail, glazing over that with another colour, and backwards and forwards, dark to light and light to dark. Now if I sound a bit croaky, this is because this is the third attempt at recording a voiceover for this video today, and I've not long got over COVID, so please forgive me if I sound a bit gruff. Okay, so I've mixed up a pale lilac colour. It's got a little bit of blue in it as well, and just blocking in, and I keep blocking in. If I repeat myself during this recording, it's because I've already recorded it twice before, and I don't know if I'm repeating myself again or not, as the case may be. Okay, so yeah, Liquitex Basics. They're one of my favourite acrylics. They're inexpensive, so they are suitable for beginners. But they are of artist quality. They do have a really good light fast rating, and I believe they're actually made by Winsor & Newton, just under the name of Liquitex, so they're wonderful. But I do mix them in. I do have some Liquitex soft body acrylics, and I also have golden acrylics, golden open acrylics that dry a little bit slower, but all different ones, and they're all interchangeable, intermixable. So the best dark materials you have are the ones you've already got. So use those, and I hope somebody out there in the big wide world is painting along while listening to me waffle on. Okay, so base coats are on the beak, and now I'm beginning to add some colour. Keep referring back to my reference image, and in this video, as suggested by one of my subscribers, I'm actually going to start having the finished painting up in the top left hand corner now, so you can see what I'm aiming for. Because sometimes if you're not actually the one doing the painting, it can be a bit off-putting if you don't know what I'm actually aiming for and I can't describe it properly. So yeah, okay, so yeah, just building up coats now, lots and lots of layers. So I always start off, most mediums working the same, and I just want to get these markings in. They were in originally, and I could still see the lines from the original layers underneath shining through, and just building up these layers here. And how I work acrylics, it's all about glazes. So if I'm not putting the right colour in at the moment, it doesn't matter, because I just glaze colours in over the top of this. So the brushes I'm using today are by Daler Rowney. I've had them donkey's years and they just suit me fine. I've got numerous brushes, some by well-known brands, some just generic, and as long as they do the job they're intended for and what I've purchased them for, they're fine. I don't look for anything really particular in a brush. An acrylic brush, it just needs to have a bit of a spring to it, and that's all really. When working with acrylics, do try not to let the paint go further up the brush than halfway, because if you get acrylic paint up into the furrow of the brush, that's the part of the brush that holds the bristles, and it dries up there, it makes the bristles splay out, and then you just end up with a splayed out bristle brush that's, you know, not very good for detailing things like that, because it won't hold its point anymore. So keep that in mind. Keep the paint down the bottom end of the bristles, and don't let the paint dry in the bristles either. I mean, you can get brush cleaners and things like, I use the Masters brush cleaner if any of my brushes do get into trouble, but 9 times out of 10 I just wash them at the end of the day in water or in soapy water, and does the job. Yeah, so just look after your brushes, they'll last you a lifetime, and don't leave them soaking in water either, because that will ruin them as well. Okay, so I'm just building up lots and lots of layers, as I said, translucent layers at the minute, just glazing away, just trying to get some nice shape and form into this beak. They've got a beautiful beak, puffins have. If you've ever seen puffins in the wild, oh, they're phenomenal creatures, and it's really weird because you can't see their nostrils. Even on a really, really close-up photograph, you can't see the nostrils. It's fascinating, really. Bird anatomy. Now I'm just going on, I've just mixed up a bit of an opaque mixture here, and just popping some detail on, because you have to remember that a bird's beak is made out of keratin, the same as our nails, so they are a textured part of the bird. You know, they're not really, really shiny and sleek unless, you know, unless they're wet, then they're going to be shiny, but they have ridges and texture there. And when I paint with acrylics, I do like to have texture in my paintings, but I like it to be a physical texture, and a texture that can be seen but not felt. I do like all my layers to be flat to the surface of the paper or the canvas, whatever I'm working on. So just building up the look of the texture, just with highlights and shadows and different colours. You can work on different mediums with different grounds, with acrylic paint. You can work on paper as long as it's either gessoed, or you can work on mixed media papers. You can also get canvas pads, and that's like just sheets of canvas but in a pad, like you'd buy a pad of paper. So if you're interested in getting started in acrylics, then I thoroughly recommend the Liquitex Basics, and yeah, you could just grab yourself a pad of canvas sheets and just try that. There's so much to learn, and it's never ending for everybody, for anybody and everybody. The journey is just never ending, and I think that's what makes art fun. That's what makes it fun for me, is that you know, you reach one goal and there's always more goals ahead of you that you can strive to achieve. It's wonderful. Okay, just adding some darker shapes and shadows to the beak. Some more glazing going on, and really glazing it allows the light to go through and bounce off the pigments of the different layers underneath, and that's what gives it the richness. The more layers of glazing you can build up, the richer the painting looks when it's finished. Now obviously with acrylics, these acrylics dry matte, the Liquitex Basics dry matte, so when your painting is finished it can look a little bit flat, but as soon as it's varnished, all of those colours come back to life and they look as though they've just been applied. They're fresh, they're deep. So I think with most acrylic paintings that do dry matte, you need that added varnish. Even if it's a matte varnish, it will still give it that luster and depth. And then, you know, acrylic paintings can look just like oil paintings, you know, and vice versa. It's depending how you work the medium, how you build up your layers. But the idea with glazing is for those layers to be transparent, translucent layers, so that the light can enter and bounce around on the pigments of the layers underneath, giving it added depth. Okay, so obviously you wouldn't want to just try and apply detail to this bird's face in the white area straight onto blue, so we're blocking in with the white to begin with. And now where the feathers look black, we're going to be blocking in with this colour that I've mixed, and it's a very deep blue with a little bit of lilac, well, a little bit of purple popped in, just to give it a bit of depth. So if I'm painting a subject and it does have traditional black and white in it, I never paint just with black and white. I keep my pure white and jet black right till the end, and maybe add a tiny bit to give it a bit of a punch at the end, because less is more. But as I'm building up the darker layers and the lighter layers, I blend them in with other colours to give them depth. So if it's a dark area that I want to look warm, then I'll mix in maybe dark reds, reddish browns, burgundies, things like that. If it's a dark area that I want to look cool, then I'll mix in blues and lilacs, things like that. And the same goes for highlights. When you're highlighting areas, if you want a highlighted area to look warm, then you make the highlights of a warm hue. If you want the highlights to look cool, you make the highlights with a cool hue. Obviously with this one, and as I always say with all of my artworks, I do bring in background colours into the subject itself. So you'll see this later on, that the blues used in the back are also used in the feather, the glazing on the feathers on the wing. So it's just to tie the whole painting together and give it an overall feel of either cool or warm, or, you know, whatever I'm looking for on the day. And moving on. Now the palette I use to mix my colours on is like a tempered glass palette. It's called a New Wave glass palette, and it measures 12 inches by 16 inches, and I slot that into a Masterson artist palette. Now the Masterson artist palette is like a large airtight plastic box, but meant for art materials and not food. It's like a big Tupperware tray with a lid, and the New Wave glass palette fits so snugly in there. Now I don't know if the two companies actually got together and designed this together, or if it just happened to work out this way, but it's absolutely wonderful. I can keep my acrylics wet for weeks just using this airtight system, and it's amazing because, you know, less wastage. We're all, you know, fans of that, aren't we? Your paint's not going to waste, because any of you that already work with acrylics, you know that acrylics dry out really quick when you're working with them. They dry very fast on the canvas or very fast on whatever surface you're painting on, but they also dry out very quickly in your palette too. And as a beginner, you might find this a little bit frustrating, because paints aren't cheap, you know, nobody can afford to throw paint away, and seeing paint dry on your palette before you've had time to use it can be very disheartening. But with this system, with the New Wave glass palette and the Masterson artist palette combined, I can squirt my colours out into there, out of my tubes onto my palette, then get a piece of dampened kitchen towel, put it in one of the corners of the palette, put the lid back on, and those paints will be wet for weeks. And as I'm using them, when I've got the palette open, I do mist them down with water every 10 minutes or so, just to keep them wet. Okay, back to the painting. So now I've mixed up a lilac grey, lilac grey, yeah. And I'm just applying shapes. I'm looking at my reference images that I've got on my iPad, and I'm just seeing where the sun is catching the feathers, where it's highlighting the feathers, and those shapes I'm transferring and mirroring onto my painting. Now at the moment I'm using like this violet grey that I've mixed up, but I could be using cream or white, because once these shapes are in, I'm going to be glazing over them, so it really doesn't matter what colour I'm using at the moment. Now, having said that, if you're painting and you do accidentally put a colour somewhere you didn't mean to, fair enough, you can cover it over with acrylics, but try putting it in a couple of other places first and then covering. So maybe you put it in 3 places, then cover it. Because the thing is, if you make a mistake and it's only in one area and you've covered it up, if you can still see it, it will look like an error. But if it's in more than one area of your painting, then it looks deliberate. So just keep that in mind. Okay, this is not for the faint-hearted, because I know this looks awful at the moment going onto the face with this colour. But I need to get some depth. I need to get some shape onto the head, because I can't just leave that big patch of white on his face like that. So building up layers again, building up these glazes, going gradually darker and changing the colours with each glaze that I put on adds depth and shape and form to the bird's head. So we will be zooming in a minute. You'll get a bit of a closer look. So round the back of the eye as well, keeping a close eye on my reference image at the same time, and just blotting a little bit out there, building up lots and lots of layers, blotting it out a little bit more and zooming in. So obviously you wouldn't want to, well, if you were painting sort of abstract or sort of for children's book illustrations and things like that, it'd just look embarrassed, I guess. So, but now we're going on with a more orange glaze, building up all different colours. So the more colours the merrier, and all paintings go through ugly stages, and as long as you trust your techniques, you will reach the end goal. For some people you might get there quicker, but it, you know, doesn't mean it's not going to work. Just keep building your layers. If you're not happy with how something looks, don't give up. It just means it isn't finished. It just needs a few more layers. So trust your tools, trust your techniques, work with good quality products as well, so you can predict the outcome of what you're working with. Because if you're working with an inferior product, then nobody can predict the outcome of it. But if you're working with tried and tested products, especially if you've watched some reviews of what the product can actually do, then you know you're going to be able to get there in the end. So going in with a white, and as I said, less is more when if you are going to use white and black, a little bit of highlight in there. And when I dab it with my fingers, I'm blending it down and just lifting a little bit off if I've gone too heavy with it. So putting sort of a cheekbone in there, lifting that part of his face up a little bit. A little bit more detailing around there. And areas like this you can use dry brushing a little bit. That's when your brush is quite dry, hasn't got much paint or water on it. And you use the texture of the canvas or the texture of the paper that you're working on to give your painting a little bit more texture too. But I wouldn't recommend you overdo doing dry brushing, because too much of it can look quite amateurish. But then again, if that's a style that you want, but there's a lot of dry brushing, then go for it. I'm just explaining how I do things and how I like my paintings to look. Your technique, your style, it might be different to mine, so if it makes you happy, go for it, because in the end, that's, as artists, that's what we're all doing. We're just creating art because we love to do it. Don't let anybody stop you or anybody else tell you otherwise. Okay, going on with some more of this lilac, this greyish lilac, getting more highlights on the feather details, and as I said, I'll just glaze over them later once they're dry and tint them to the colour that I want them to be if I'm not quite getting it this way. Now what you're not seeing is between each of these layers I'm actually drying the canvas with a hairdryer. Just a minute or so between each layer, make sure that the layers underneath are nice and set. If I'm going on like this, then the paints have just been watered down with deionized water. If I want to take the paint that little step further and use it like a watercolour, I tend to just thin it down with a thinning medium then, an acrylic thinning medium, like a glazing medium. And it just helps the paint bind to the canvas or the paint layers underneath it if it's been thinned down a lot. all of my paintings are varnished in the end, so whether the paint's been thinned down with water or a glazing medium doesn't matter, because once they're varnished they stay in place, they're not going anywhere. Okay, looking back at my reference image now and having a look for the warmer tones that are underneath the tail, and I mixed up this colour. Can't tell you which colours are mixed together to get it, because it's quite a while ago when I filmed this and I don't keep notes. I have that many paints out going backwards and forwards, so I don't really keep note of that. But what I will do, I'll make a little video of how I set up my palette and mix on my palette. So if you haven't liked and subscribed already, please do if you're enjoying this video. Thank you to all of my subscribers so far. Love you all, you're amazing. Thank you for everyone who takes time to like my videos and leave comments, and any questions, I do read them all and I do answer everybody's questions as well. So if you've got any mediums or subjects that you'd like to see me cover, then just pop a comment in the box below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Okay, shadowing under the leg now. As you can see with the wing and the tail feathers here, all the colours that I ended up glazing into there's purples, there's sort of beiges, greens and blues and pinks, so all different ones. And you could go on forever. You could keep glazing, adding more highlights or shadows, glazing in again, never ending. And it's so therapeutic. Cup of coffee, podcast on and paint, it's wonderful. Okay, so building up the layers still underneath the tail, building up some shadows, and then building up some highlights. And as I said, that between these layers, what you're not seeing is I am drying them between layers, because if you go onto a layer and it's not dry, you've got a good tendency of lifting it back off, and then you'll end up with little white gaps in your painting where it's lifted the pigment off the canvas. So either let the layers dry and go make a coffee or a cup of tea or something, or just dry them with a hairdryer just for a minute or so, and then let your canvas cool, because acrylics dry quickly already. If you paint onto a warm canvas, they'll dry even quicker. So just, make sure you give your canvas chance to cool between layers as well if you've dried it with a hairdryer. Okay, base coats going onto the legs, because obviously we're going to be painting some oranges and things on there, and we don't want to be painting over the blue, because naturally yellows, oranges, reds, colours like that are naturally translucent anyway, so the blue would have been showing through. So always best just to pop a quick base coat on, takes minutes to dry, and then you can go back on there with your more transparent colours. If you get, like under the tail, if you get your base coats going on, your darker base coats, and then you start building up your lighter colours, try not to cover all of the base coats that you've already put on. I mean, if you do, it's no worry, because you can go back on again and put some more darks back in and repeat the process. But when you're building up layers, always try to leave a little bit of the first layers showing through, and it gives your painting that little bit of depth. It allows the sunlight, the rays of light to penetrate the layers and bounce around and off the pigments, and it will give it that depth. Plus any detailing you've put in the first layers will show through and give it a little bit more depth as well. So just add in some more shading, tinting the colours that are already there. Oh, I'm so hoping this voiceover is going to record okay. Third time lucky, eh? Going on a little bit more. And the feathers don't have to be, perfect one for one. I'm looking at my reference image, but it's the feel of the feathers that I want more than ever. I mean, this painting, it's only 12 inches by 10 inches, so it's not huge. I mean, you could do something bigger than life size and really go for the details then. But this is a lovely size, and it's a nice size for beginners too, 12 inch by 10 inch. I wouldn't go too big if you're a beginner with acrylic, simply because of the drying time. You could get halfway through putting a wash on or something, and it will be drying before you've had time to blend things out, and that can be a little bit frustrating when you're first starting out. So try not to go for something too big unless you've got an airbrush, because airbrush backgrounds are nice and easy. I can do some videos on airbrushing too if you'd like to see some. There's no airbrushing involved in this one. This is all brushwork. Okay, so on with an orange. Now the leg that's nearest to us, I've got to remember that that's going to be slightly lighter because it's not being shadowed by the puffin so much as the other leg. So keeping that in mind. And the jaggedy edges of the legs I do tidy up excuse me, later towards the painting with a little bit of white and blue, the background colours, and I just tidy everything up. I've not filmed that. I just did that sitting down one evening on the sofa and just had the canvas on my knee and I just tidied around the edges. That's the lovely thing about acrylics. You can always go back to it and work it a little bit more if you want to, because it dries so quickly. You know, you could do some layers, go and have dinner, come back, everything's dry and it's lovely, and then you can just, you know, piddle about and do a little bit more, and it's lovely, really nice. And obviously if something goes wrong, it's no worries, because you can just paint over it and start again. I mean, if a painting goes completely wrong, you can literally just paint the whole of the canvas white and start all over again. So, you know, don't ever fear that you've ruined anything. The only way you could ruin a canvas painting, I guess, is if you spilt terps on it or ripped the canvas somehow, something like that, or dented it. But then you can get dents out of canvases too by wetting the back of the canvas and drying it with a hairdryer, so you can actually pull dents back out of canvases. You can patch holes as well, but I think canvases are so cheap nowadays, unless you've had a special one made, you know, of a certain size. They're cheap enough you might as well just buy a new one than repair an old ripped one. Anyway, back onto the painting, back on with some shadows. I thought we were going back on with some shadows. There we go. I should know after doing this 3 times today what's coming next. I hope everybody's keeping well. I hope you're keeping creative and painting, drawing or crafting, whatever you like to do. Some more shadows going in. And the colour I'm using now is just a darkened colour of the colour that I used on the legs. So it's keeping that, just keeping quite a limited palette, I guess. Just so everything gels together. So it looks like one painting and not something stuck onto something else. That's why I like to bring background colours into the subjects, because then it makes it look like the subject is part of that area. You know, the bird is actually sitting in front of that area. It's not just cut out and pasted on. So try and use your colours throughout a painting. If you're painting fur, then maybe some of the highlights could pull in some of the colours of the animal's surroundings. If you're doing eyes and the animal is outside, then maybe a little bit of blue in the reflection or in the highlight of the eyes, so it looks like it's outside. Okay, now I've put where the grasses are going to go on the foreground, I've just put a base coat of cream, a cream colour across there, because obviously the grasses going over that blue would have been hard work, because some of the greens are very translucent colours too. Now this is a good case for the glazing technique. So what I'm doing, I'm using a cream colour and I'm building up the texture on the legs. But as I'm building up this texture, if I was to leave it like that, and I do cover both legs like this with these dots, it would look like the bird had got some sort of disease. But once I start glazing, it just pulls everything back to how it should be. So you can still see the detail, but the contrast isn't that high. So when I talk about glazing, it's like a stained glass window. You can see everything on the other side of a stained glass window, except that the colour is changed. You know, what you're seeing has been tinted by the stained glass window, and that's all a glaze is. You're just tinting whatever's already on the canvas, but you can still see detail underneath. Just be careful you don't pick up and try to glaze with an opaque colour. Excuse me. If you're using a good quality material, then generally speaking, on the tubes of paint, it should say the light fastness of the paint, the pigments that have been used, which can give you a good idea of light fastness as well. And with acrylics and oils, how opaque a paint is as well. So it'll either be opaque or translucent, transparent, or semi-opaque. You know, it's going to be one of those three. And if in doubt, just do a little swatch card for yourself and put a black line across your swatch card with a Sharpie pen, let that dry, and then paint your paint across that black line, and you'll see if it's opaque or transparent by how much or how little it covers the black line. Okay, now the bird's chest and tummy area were just completed exactly the same as I did the underneath of the tail and the face. So it's pretty, really no point in showing you that process, because one, I had the canvas laying on its side, and two, it's just a rinse and repeat of everything else on the white areas of the bird. So, okay, so with the grass area, as you can see on the little photo of the finished painting, it's just grasses growing in different directions, windswept, and so I'm just going in very randomly with this dark olive colour that I've mixed up as a base coat, and then I use a variety of different greens, some cool greens, some warm greens, just to create random grass stems and leaves. And you'll get a little bit of a close-up here in a minute. There you go. So if you look out of your window into nature, and there's bushes and trees and grass and flowers and hedges and things, there's a multitude of greens. There's warm greens, cool greens, you know, lime green, olive green, all mixed in together, and they all look perfect because that's nature. So you can do exactly the same thing in your painting. You can use all different greens in a painting, and they'll all look correct. You know, your painting will look complete. Not the same with blues though, so just keep that in mind. Don't try to mix your blues on a painting unless you're really sure of the colours you're using. But with greens, you know, everything goes. It's lovely. So I've just worked up lots of random lines slightly going in different directions, but all falling in one whole direction, if you know what I mean. I'm waving my hands around like you can see what I'm doing. But yeah, just that randomness of the leaves on the grass leaves. And then building up some highlights with beiges, and there's some yellow ochre in there as well. And obviously, if the light is catching the bird in various places, then the light is also going to be catching some of these strands of grass as well. So we want to pop those in as well. Can't believe my voice is holding out this long. Doing well. So where are we now? We have about 4 minutes left. So pop in some highlights on there where the light's hitting the ends of those leaves. And if you haven't been plein air painting, you know, drawing and painting out in the open, grass is brilliant. It's just lovely. Just go and sit on the local park or in your garden with a sketch pad and some pencils or some paints. Just sketch a little area of grass, and it's really relaxing. You can use any colours in there. You can put burgundies in there, lemon yellows, lime yellows and lime greens. It's wonderful. And just enjoy yourself. Just paint for the sake of painting because you love to create. some more highlights going in. Dry brushing can be used to create texture in this grass as well if you want, but not too much. And obviously, as I said, dry brushing is where you have very little pigment and water on your brush. You might have a little bit more pigment than water, so it doesn't flow as well and it catches on the ridges of the canvas or the paper, whatever you're painting on. You can even paint on mixed media paper, so you could do that. But dry brushing does have its place in art, but I wouldn't overdo it personally. I like it in some areas, but not in a lot of areas in one painting. I do have supply pages on my website actually, kerrynewell.com, and there's I think about 7 separate pages, one page for different materials: charcoal and graphite, oil paints, watercolours and gouache, acrylics, pastels, studio supplies and things like that. Just shows you what I use in different mediums, but that's all over on my website, kerrynewell.com, if you'd like to take a look. I mean, there's obviously more on my supplies list than I've mentioned today in this video. And that's the grasses done, and that's how we ended up looking. So that's the Puffin in acrylics finished. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for sticking with me through this video in my croaky voice. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and for those of you who have, thank you very much. It's truly appreciated. Join me on social media. I'm on MeWe, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. And yeah, stay creative, my friends, stay safe, and I'll see you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Hi there everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be creating a little lizard in acrylics. For the background I'm going to be using a mixture of Indian ink. It needed to be permanent, and you'll soon see why. Some washing up liquid, or you call it dish soap in America I believe, a straw, a pipette, a glass, little Derwent spritzer bottle with deionized water in, some Chromacolour, they're liquid acrylics, and a variety of brushes. The brushes are used by Crafter's Choice by Royal and Langnickel, and one little Winsor & Newton synthetic sable brush. I've had a lot of questions since recently posting the finished painting on social media, but most of the questions have been regarding the background, so I have included that in this video. The video is going to run about 38 minutes, so I hope everyone's keeping well, and here we go. So I mixed a mixture of deionized water, some of the Indian ink and some washing up liquid, mixed it together and then used the straw and began to blow bubbles. This is really a hit and miss idea that I had, and I've got to let you know that the finished painting was created on the 4th attempt. So already you can see the bubbles are forming little cells that separate when they hit the paper. And as you can see, it looks fabulous, doesn't it? You can see all the little shapes it's making on the paper, but they don't stay like that. The bubbles are constantly shifting, so it really is, whether you're going to get a good result or not just depends on the bubbles. And yeah, I think it was my 4th attempt that I was happy with. So just dropping the bubbles on and letting them do their thing. And this is a process where you need to give it time. You can't speed up the drying of the background when you're doing something like this. You've literally got to let the bubbles pop and dry on their own, because if you disturb it at all, the bubbles shift and the ink can't penetrate the paper fast enough, so you just end up with a grey wash. Now, I did add a little bit of walnut ink, a walnut coloured ink into the black ink when I mixed it in the little cup, and you can see that on the finished painting to the top left. So just adding a little bit more ink there, letting it go down between the bubbles. And when you've done all of this, you just have to walk away. So if you're going to have a go at doing something like this, I do suggest you use a good quality paper. I used a Saunders Waterford, 140 pounds in weight. You could use a higher weight paper, but when you are producing pieces that might not look any good in the end, it seems a shame to waste a sort of a 200 or 300 weight paper. I'll probably use the other pieces for something, I just haven't decided what yet. You really have to give this a lot of time, so if you're going to have a go, as I said, do it at night time and just then leave it alone and let it dry overnight. As you can see, I'm just moving some of the bubbles out of the way and finding areas where the bubbles had made a gap, so there was no ink going down to that piece of paper in the gap, and then just flooding it with a little bit more ink. Yeah, it's a really fun process. It's a messy process, but if you're doing this, make sure your piece of paper is on a taped down to a board, because obviously it will cockle, being only 140 pound in weight. And have your board preferably inside of a tray to soak up any, or to stop the ink going anywhere that runs over. I've got a feeling it's like people when they do resin art and they have to have a waterproof mat underneath. Okay, so this was one piece of background paper that dried and I was happy with. So I then transferred my sketch lines using a piece of Tracedown paper onto the dried piece of paper. And this is why I wanted to use permanent black ink, permanent black Indian ink. It is light fast, and obviously it's permanent. It won't budge if it gets water on it now. So, and then going on with a base coat of green. So I just wanted to build up lots and lots of layers on this little lizard. It's a fun piece to do. It was a fun piece to do. I finished it yesterday. Really enjoyed it. Listening to some podcasts and a bit of YouTube and things while I was doing this. And I don't think my head or my hair got in the way once, which is hooray. Well, I've not watched the video all the way through yet, so I might get a bit of a surprise, but hopefully not. So zoomed in overhead. I actually attached my camera to a microphone stand. It's one of the heavy duty ones, so it's very heavy based, and it's just so I can get the camera positioned right overhead. Okay, so there he is all blocked in. That is just a base coat. These acrylics, the Chroma Color acrylics, dry very fast, and they're used in animation production. So they're matte, they dry matte, there's no sheen or anything like that. I don't know why I've paused on that bit for so long, but I'm probably grabbing a cup of coffee or something. So you can see that the background, I'm really pleased with how the background turned out actually on this one. But it's trial and error, isn't it? Art's an adventure. So it's always nice to try something new. If you have an idea, instead of pondering, will it work, won't it work, just give it a go. And I'm really glad I gave this idea a go, and it worked out well. So yes, a long pause on this piece, but there you go. So I do use deionized water all the way through this, and the reason I don't use tap water with my water soluble products is we don't know what chemicals are actually in it. And I'm using all acid-free products. I'm using acid-free paper, acid-free masking tape, artist quality paints. They're all light fast, and it's just a shame if you add any impurities into the mix by using tap water. So that's why I go for deionized water, and it's really cheap. You can pick up a big tub of it for just a couple of pounds from local supermarket, and it's just what people use in car batteries and things like that. Okay, so now all the green is dry. As I said, I do dry everything off in between with a hairdryer just to speed up the process, even though this paint does dry extremely quick. And I'm mixing all of my paints on a little ceramic palette. Using ceramic, because ceramic is cold, it does slow down the drying process of the paints a little bit, so you're not fighting with the drying time. So if I paint a bit and then go back to lift some more paint and that's already dry, it can be really frustrating. So either use a wet palette or go for ceramic. Even an old dinner plate will do, as long as it's white. Add in just a little bit more. So, and what I'll be doing throughout this painting is doing a little bit of detailing, letting it dry, and then I will be going over with glazing. And what it is, glazing is just tinting a colour. So if you're using translucent colours, which I am, a lot of these colours are quite translucent. It took 2 or 3 coats to cover the background when I blocked in the frog. So they are quite translucent. They were letting some of the texture of the background show through, so it did need more than 1 coat. But what it is, you just build up your layers. You can add lighter details and then glaze over them with more pigmented or brighter colours, I should say. And obviously greens, reds, yellows, anything like that, they do tend to be more transparent than your browns and things like that. I'm going to keep saying things like that, but I hope you understand what I mean. So all I'm doing at the moment is just adding a little bit of texture. So I'm just altering the colours now, because none of that texture is going to be left, you know, in total view on the finished piece, but you might get a sense of it when you look a little bit closer at the lizard. So between the scales, I didn't want it just to be a flat colour, because that would look unrealistic. I wanted this to be some texture underneath the scales, and the scales are going to go on top of this, as you will see in a bit. So getting back to glazing, it is literally just tinting lighter colours. So what I tend to do, especially with this painting, is I went in and made all of the little scales white. You'll see that later on. And then I went over them with a very watery consistency acrylic in greens, and I used blues and red on its back as well, and yellows. And what it does, as you drag that translucent, I shouldn't say drag, should I, as you brush that translucent colour over white or cream, say, it will leave a slight tint to the white or the cream. So it doesn't grab all of the colour, it just grabs some of it. So you can still see the white detailing underneath, but it's diffused slightly. It's like looking through a stained glass window. You can see what's on the other side of the stained glass window, but it's tinted with the whatever colour they've used on the glass. I hope that makes sense. You'll see it in a little bit. So yes, just building up the texture there. There's no physical texture, excuse me. There's no bumps or lumps or anything like that. I'm using these liquid acrylics, very liquidy. So there's no texture standing up above the paper. It's all completely flat. So as you can see, I've worked that texture down the body. Now just putting some shadowing on this leg. And this leg, because it was all the base coats are now on, and this leg was the first part that I'd actually started painting some detail into, I wasn't really sure how I was going to go about this. I try and approach every painting differently, because every painting is different. It's a new part of my journey. I've been painting for donkey's years. I'm 57 now, started painting when I was 4, drawing and painting when I was 4. But I still approach every project afresh, I guess. I don't want to get into a rut where I'm just doing the same old thing over and over and over again. That's why you'll see lots of different types of videos on my YouTube channel. Pastels, coloured pencils, acrylics, inks, graphite and charcoal will be coming up soon. Just had to pause the recording there as I coughed. Back again. So yes, I approach every painting afresh. It's something that I hope it keeps my art fresh, that I'm not doing the same thing over and over again. Plus, I think I'd get bored if I was working with the same medium all the time. I'd probably get a little bit bored, and it just keeps you from getting stale as well. Because I do like using paints as well as pencils and pastels and things. I think if I walked away from, say, paints for too long, I don't want to paint and go back to it and then feel a bit stale. So I just like to keep it fresh, keep it different, all different subjects too, so that's nice to get in the mix: fish and reptiles, amphibians, mammals and birds. I do human portraits too, as commissions, but only if they've got a pet in with them. So it's not something that I would advertise or anything like that, although I've just said it on my YouTube channel, but you know what I mean. I would rather do flora and fauna, because I do like to do plants and things as well. So stippling, it's when you lift the paintbrush up or the pencil or pen and put it back down and up and down, up and down. That's stippling, and it's I'll use a lot of it in this painting because I just feel it creates a sense of texture. I hope having the finished painting up in the left hand corner helps. I just wish I'd got something to look at while I was doing it. I'd got reference images, but they don't look like this little lizard looks. He's quite stylized. The colours are possibly, yeah, sort of 80% true, but I did brighten him up with a lot of different glazes. And obviously colour isn't everything. This little lizard in real life would have greens and blues and the red markings on his back and the yellow stripes on his head, but under different lighting he would look different, obviously. So this is my representation of him. I'm not working hyper realistically or anything like that. I don't want to recreate a photograph. The photograph is already there, so there's no point in me then going and reproducing it. I want the little lizard to be my little lizard. And he wasn't on a pebbly looking background either. He was sitting on a branch and his tail was hanging over the branch, and quite different to how I've portrayed him in this painting. If you're looking for reference images, I do recommend two different websites, and one is called unsplash.com and the other one is called pixabay.com, and both sites have thousands and thousands of reference images that are free to download. You can use them in your paintings with no copyright or anything like that. So if you want to have a go at painting a little lizard, I suggest you pop over to one of those sites and see what photos you can see on there, download them and then give it a try. And I'd love to hear on social media or even here on YouTube if you do have a go at the bubble background. I'm going to call it bubble background because I don't know what else to call it. But yeah, do let me know how it turns out for you. But just, as I said, be prepared. It might take a few goes before you get one that actually looks like you could use it for something. I won't waste the other ones. This one was the fourth, so I won't waste the other three. I will try and think of something to do with them, although I'm not sure what. If my voice sounds funny, I'm sorry, but I keep feeling like I want to cough. I'm just going to have a drink. I'm back. How's everybody keeping? Well, I hope. Wow, can't believe we're in November. 1st of November 23. Wow, this year's flown, absolutely flown by. And I've not got my Christmas tree up yet. What's wrong with me? Those of you that know me well know that I normally have the Christmas tree go up in the sort of middle of October. Yeah, Christmas addict. Oh dear. So just stippling on some more layers. And because I'm using light colours, I can easily glaze another colour over the top. You'll see a lot of glazing on the body when I start putting the little scales on there. So using one of the little Crafter's Choice brushes here, I use these for acrylics and gouache, and they're just brilliant. I don't really know what they're actually made for, but they're very cheap. You can buy them in a big pack for just a few pounds. They're not really expensive brushes, but I've had them years, and they're just brilliant. Wash them out straight away after using acrylics or inks. Wash them with a little bit of washing up liquid, and they're fine. They're not in perfect condition. Some of them splay a tiny bit, but I never throw a brush away. If a brush loses its point and starts to splay, I put it to one side, because I can always use it for something else, whether that's foliage or texture on fur and things like that. There's always a use for a damaged brush. Just had to pause again for another coughing fit. I don't know why, just got a tickle. Oh crumbs. Just it to come on when I'm recording a voiceover. So that's a little bit of glazing, because that colour I'm putting on is quite translucent, so it won't cover all the detail up that I've just put on. It's just tinting it a little bit, just adding to that shadow. And the best thing about acrylics, if you make a mistake, dry it with a hairdryer, or just wait till it dries on its own and go back over it. You can never run out of layers with acrylic. They will just keep going on, because you're actually painting with plastic, I guess. So yeah, you just keep layering up, and it's lovely because you can go light to dark or dark to light with acrylics. And these Chromacolour acrylics, they are brilliant. They're very liquidy. They're in like, well, you saw it at the very beginning of the video, they're in like little bottles, and they're very, very pigmented. So you only need to squeeze out a tiny bit, just a couple of drops onto a ceramic palette, and that's all I needed of each colour really for the whole of the painting. Going on with some lights. Very self-explanatory doing this little leg. So all the legs are now done, and we can go on to the body. So darkening up this side now. I keep turning the board around just to make it easy for me to get to certain areas of the painting. Those of you that have known me a long time probably remember that I had a lot of problems with my rotator cuff muscles in my shoulder. So now I just like to have everything where I can get to them, because I definitely don't want to spark my shoulder problems off now that it seems to have all healed and gone away. So the painting, the finished painting on the left hand side of the screen is the correct way round. And how I'm painting here, I just keep rotating it. I'm not working at my easel today. I'm working, for this painting, I worked at about a 10 or 15 degree angle on my art desk in my studio. So nice and relaxed. Lots of coffee and podcasts, and I think I listened to 2 podcasts and then just listened to some YouTube videos, which was nice. Always a relaxed time when you're painting or drawing. Well, it should be. Never let it stress you out, because you'll lose the joy of it then. Don't be frightened of your products or anything like that. You know, this is only a piece of paper and some paint. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. You can either, if something goes wrong, you can either carry on, just experiment with it. If it's completely ruined and you know you don't want to try and pull it back to anything that resembles what you're after in the first place, just carry on painting. Just experiment with colours and techniques, things like that. And because we all learn from our mistakes, and sometimes mistakes aren't even mistakes, sometimes we do get happy accidents, so just keep that in mind as well. No such thing as a perfect painting or a perfect artist even. Practice is progress, not perfection. It just takes the pressure off trying to achieve perfection. You'll never get there. Nobody ever gets there. And to be quite honest, if you were completely 100% happy with everything you produced, that would probably take some of the joy out of it too, because there wouldn't be any challenges left anymore. So going on with a lighter colour now. And with these acrylic paints, you just add white to make them lighter. Obviously that makes them more opaque. Decided that it needs a bit more shading on the base coats there, because obviously the scales are going to be showing on top of that, but I do want some of that darkness to show through between the scales. And just going backwards and forwards. And when I'm working on a painting, I do flit about quite a lot. I might get a bit bored doing this texture up here, so I'll move on to a leg or the tail, something like that. And it's not just a case of getting bored of one area either. It is a case of trying to keep a certain amount of balance within a painting. Drying it off with a hairdryer. And just keeping that balance. So even when you think you've reached the end of a painting, just step back a little bit. If you've sat in front of a painting for a long time, it's so easy just to get lost within that painting. So just take a step back, make a coffee, come back, have another look. If you're still unsure whether it's complete or not, take a photograph on your phone, have a look at it. If you go into your phone editor and mess around with the contrast or colour balance, things like that, if you can make your phone look better than your painting, then your painting isn't finished. It's a nice way of, you could edit your photo, and that could give you ideas of how you could finish off your painting, whether you need to darken some areas, lighten others, add more colour somewhere. Okay, so I'd gone onto these two areas on his head and added white. Then I'd gone over the white and added sort of a beige, a dark beige colour. And now I'm going on to that with sort of a lighter ochre colour. But these will be, because it's a light colour, I still go in and glaze over these, so I give them more of a yellow tint towards the end of the painting. But I needed to get the white on first to cover up the green, and obviously I'd use the green to cover up the background. So just working from the underneath of a subject, don't mean the belly, I mean the underneath layers of a subject, trying to work from that to the top, to the surface, I guess. Now I have put on some white dots and just glazing over them with a very diluted green. And sometimes it won't cover the white straight away. You might have to do more than one coat when you're glazing. Oh, hair got in the way then. Oh, I thought I'd banished the hair from all of my future videos. Oh, and I've got a reminder on screen. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And for those of you that do like and have already subscribed to my channel, I appreciate it so very much. I really do. And the lovely comments people leave for me, not only on YouTube but on social media too. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn, and I can't say Twitter because it's called X now, isn't it? It's just, thank you so very much for everybody's encouraging comments, and I'm happy to say that I'm doing quite well with the YouTube channel at the moment, so, and it's thanks to you. And I will keep adding videos as I do them. I wouldn't be able to add them before I've done them, would I? It was a bit senseless thing to say, but you know what I mean. As soon as I've got one, a new one ready, I will be hurrying to pop it on for you. If there are any subjects you'd like me to make a video about, or any mediums, just pop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. The last comment on the last video was a lady would like to see a snake created with pastels, so that's something I'm looking into at the minute. Okay, so I've gone over with some white, pop some white in, and now I'm glazing. And I am looking at my reference image at the minute because I'm just making sure I'm putting the values in correctly where the shadows are, so how far round the animal's body and head the shadows go. That green I'm adding there is a little bit opaque, so I do go back in and add a little bit more white to the dots and then go back over with a more translucent colour, because if the colour you're trying to glaze with has white in it, a tiny bit of white you'll get away with. Too much white and it makes that colour opaque. So I'd mindlessly picked that colour up out of my palette, and it had mixed with a little bit of white. I'd probably done it and just not realised. But as I said, any problems with acrylics, you let it dry or dry it with a hairdryer, you go back on top, not a problem at all. There's probably nothing you can't fix with acrylics. Unless you've got a hole in your paper or a hole in your canvas, then that'd be a problem. But even sometimes with a big canvas you can repair holes, but not a problem with this, as I'm working on paper and it's taped to a board, so no chance of jabbing a hole in it. And you really don't want to be using your brush like that anyway. When you're stippling especially, make sure you keep a light hand, because you don't want to damage the texture of the paper underneath. A little bit more texturing. Texturizing, is that a real word? I think it might be. If not, it is now. And drying it off again. Yes, I'd noticed that on the reference image I hadn't got the shape correctly drawn around the eye, so just going in there. I do all my drawings on a separate piece of paper, make all my mistakes there or my erasing there, then I trace my finished lines, transfer them onto the paper or canvas that I'm going to paint on, generally with Tracedown paper. Now then, I had an idea and I think some of you might have seen these little tools. They're for nail art and things like that. I thought, what if I just dip that in my paint? Will it make little circles instead of using a brush? And it did. So I did the body with that. I must admit, it is a bit mind-numbingly boring though, because you've got to keep dipping it. You can do 2 or 3 dots and then you've got to dip it back into the paint. And then so I did the whole body like that, which was okay. I'm saying mind-numbingly boring, but I was listening to a podcast or YouTube at the time, so it's fine. And then I did the rest of the tail with a brush. And obviously getting smaller and smaller, and then really you can't really see the scales at all on the tail, so I just needed a little bit of lighter texture that I could then glaze over. Now I've mixed up a glaze, a green glaze, and just gently sweeping across the subject. And you must make sure that that white underneath is completely dry, because if you don't, it will mix with your green and you'll just end up with a whole lot of light green and you'll have lost all of that detail underneath. So do make sure that if you are attempting to glaze, either give it time, go and have some lunch or go out for a walk or something, or as I do, dry it off with a hairdryer, let the paper cool back down and then start to glaze. But you do need that white to definitely be completely dry, 100% dry. YouTube's wonderful because you can learn from other people's mistakes, and if I make any mistakes or have things happen I don't want them to happen, I'll always tell you. And yeah, it's just a brilliant way of learning from other artists here on YouTube. So that glaze is going on nice and clean. It's not picking up any of the white because it's dry. And as you can see, I've added little patches of white on the back because that's where they go. That's where I want the red markings to go. Now then, that red is straight out of the bottle. And as you can see, it is very translucent. So I did need a few coats of that red to go on, drying with a hairdryer between each coat. Thing is, if I'd have added white to it to make it more opaque, I would have ended up with pink, and I definitely didn't want pink. I definitely wanted a deep red, so just a case of doing more layers. If I go too deep, just add the white dots on top, which is fine, and you can keep working backwards and forwards like that. Add in a little bit more of the green glaze. Careful not to let it touch the red that's wet though, because you'll end up with brown. And just keep going backwards and forwards. There you go. I think I added 3 coats to the red, and now back on with the little tool. You can buy these little tools off Amazon, places like that. You get a pack of 5, I think, and they're just a few pounds. Don't look for the ones in the art supply area of Amazon. I think they're called embossing tools. They are so expensive. Just look for ones for nail art, and they're a lot cheaper. I wish companies wouldn't do that. As soon as they know something can be used by an artist, they seem to jack the price up, and it's so unfair. I know it's their business, but it's just very annoying. So yeah, go and look under embossing tools for nail art, and you can find these little fellows in there. And each one is double-ended, and each end is a different size. It has a different size ball on the end. But what I do find is the ones that have got the minute balls on one end, the tiny ends can have burrs on them, so you've got to be quite careful it doesn't damage your paper. But yeah, they're used by nail art technicians, I believe. So you can see now why I went so dark, wanted to go so dark with the red, and it's so that red could be seen between the scales on the back. And then I'll make sure this is completely dry, and then I will glaze over these just with the transparent red straight from the bottle. And you can go backwards and forwards. If you start glazing over an area and you find that it's gone too dark, again dry it off and then start going lighter, get some white on there. You can go backwards and forwards. It's amazing. I don't know why more people don't have a play with acrylics. They're so easy to use, very forgiving. Got to be the most forgiving medium out there. The only thing you've got to be careful of obviously is the drying time, because they do dry so very quickly. So I dried it off with a hairdryer. Now just going in with the translucent red, sorry. And he's nearly done. Once I finished this, I did go over the body with a couple more glazes, a darker glaze down the side where the shadowing is, and quite a greeny yellow glaze over the rest of the body, and I added a little bit of shadowing underneath the tummy area and the tail area, and then I called it quits, because you've got to say it's finished sometime, else you'll never get to paint anything else if you just stick with one painting forever. Leonardo da Vinci said, "A paint is never completed, merely abandoned." Well, there he is, folks. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I certainly enjoyed creating this little painting. Do let me know what you think in the comments. Do let me know if you have a go at the bubble texture background. And stay safe, everybody. Stay creative, and I will see you all soon. Take care. Bye bye.